The cabin smelled like death was rehearsing. Not the dramatic kind. No sudden collapse, no theatrical final words, just the slow, patient rot of a body forgetting how to fight. Elara's mother lay in the corner bed, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of something winding down, like a clock someone forgot to repair. Elara stood at the stove, stirring a pot of water with 3 potatoes floating in it. That's what dinner had become. Potatoes. Sometimes one, sometimes none. Her little brother Thomas sat at the table carving a stick with a dull knife, pretending he wasn't hungry. He was 8. He shouldn't have gotten so good at pretending. "You think she'll eat today?" Thomas asked without looking up. "Maybe." "You said that yesterday." "Then maybe I'll be right today." The lie tasted worse than the potatoes would. Their mother hadn't eaten in 3 days, hadn't spoken in 5. The fever had her now, pulling her under in waves. Sometimes she'd surface long enough to whisper Elara's name. Most times she just stared at the ceiling like she was reading something written there in a language only the dying understood. Elara ladled the potatoes into 2 wooden bowls, one for Thomas, one for herself. She didn't bother with a third. "Eat," she said, setting his bowl down. "You gonna try to feed her again?" "No point." "Then what are we doing?" Elara sat down across from him, her own bowl untouched. "We're surviving, same as yesterday." "Doesn't feel like surviving." "It never does." Thomas ate slowly, chewing each bite like it might be his last. Elara watched him, her chest tight. He'd gotten thinner. They all had. The winter had come early and stayed mean, and their supplies had run out faster than her mother's strength. The debt had already swallowed the land. The cabin was all they had left, and even that was borrowed time. Elara stood and walked to the window. Snow covered everything, the woods, the ridge, the path that used to lead somewhere. Now it just led to more snow. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass. How much longer? The question didn't need an answer. It never did. The knock came just after noon the next day. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and heavy. The kind of knock that didn't ask permission. It announced arrival. Elara opened the door and found herself face to face with a woman who looked like she'd been carved from the same stone as the mountains. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black wool and fur, her silver hair pulled back so tight it could have been weaponized. Behind her stood a man in a driver's coat, and behind him a carriage that didn't belong on their road. "Elara Vance," the woman said. Her voice was smooth, but it had edges. "That's me." "Good. I'm Margaretta Hale." Elara didn't recognize the name, but she recognized the look. Rich, powerful, the kind of person who didn't visit unless they wanted something. "I don't know you," Elara said. "You will." Margaretta stepped past her into the cabin without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes swept the room, the sagging furniture, the empty shelves, the woman dying in the corner, and she didn't flinch. She'd seen poverty before, probably caused some of it. "Your mother wrote to me," Margaretta said. 2 weeks ago." Elara's stomach dropped. "She what?" "She proposed an arrangement, one that benefits both our families." "What kind of arrangement?" Margaretta turned to face her, and for the first time Elara saw something almost like pity flicker across the woman's face. Almost. "A marriage," Margaretta said. Elara laughed. It came out sharp and bitter. "Marriage? To who? I don't know anyone with money." "You do now." Margaretta reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Elara, who opened it with shaking hands. It was a contract, handwritten, legal, signed at the bottom in her mother's trembling script. "Read it," Margaretta said. Elara did. The words blurred together at first, but the meaning landed hard enough to knock the air out of her lungs. Marriage. Rowan Hale. Medicine and care provided for Mrs. Vance. Financial support for Thomas Vance. Immediate relocation upon signing. Her mother had sold her. "No," Elara whispered. "It's already done," Margaretta said. "Your mother signed 2 weeks ago. I've brought the medicine she requested, and a fund has been established for your brother's education. In return, you'll marry my son." "I never agreed to this." "Your mother did. On your behalf." "She had no right." "She had every right. She's dying and you know it. This is her way of making sure you and your brother survive what comes next. Elara's hands clenched around the paper. Who the hell is Rowan Hale? Margaretta's expression went cold. He's my son, and he needs a wife. Why me? Because you're desperate, and desperation makes people agreeable. The words hit like a slap. Elara wanted to scream, to tear the contract in half, to throw this woman and her carriage and her blood money back into the snow. But then she looked at Thomas, sitting frozen at the table, his eyes wide and scared. She looked at her mother, barely breathing in the corner, and she knew. She knew there was no choice. There had never been a choice. When? Elara asked quietly. 7 days, Margaretta said. The ceremony will be private. You'll leave immediately after. And if I refuse? Then your mother dies without medicine. Your brother goes to the workhouse, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have saved them. Margaretta stepped closer, her voice dropping. I'm not here to be kind, girl. I'm here to make a deal. Your mother understood that. I suggest you do the same. Elara's throat burned, her vision blurred, but she didn't cry. She wouldn't give this woman the satisfaction. Fine, Elara said. I'll do it. Margaretta nodded. Good. The driver will deliver the medicine tonight. Pack light. You won't need much. She turned toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Margaretta said. My son. He's not what he used to be. The mountains took something from him. Don't expect a warm welcome. What happened to him? He'll tell you, or he won't. Either way, it's not my story to share. And with that, Margaretta Hale walked out, leaving Elara standing in the ruins of her life with a contract she didn't sign and a future she didn't choose. The next 6 days passed in a fog. The medicine arrived that night, small glass vials with labels Elara couldn't read, but whatever was in them worked. Her mother's fever broke. The color returned to her face. She sat up for the first time in weeks, and when she saw Elara, she cried. I'm sorry, her mother whispered, gripping Elara's hand. I'm so sorry. Don't, Elara said. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You made a choice. Now I have to live with it. Her mother's face crumpled. I had no other option. There's always another option. You just didn't want to take it. It was cruel. Elara knew it was cruel, but she didn't take it back. Thomas didn't say much. He helped Elara pack her things, a few dresses, a coat, a pair of boots. Everything fit into one small trunk. On the morning of the 6th day, he finally spoke. Are you scared? He asked. Elara looked at him. His face was too serious for 8 years old. Yeah, she said. I am. What if he's mean? Then I'll be meaner. Thomas almost smiled. Almost. You'll come back, right? He asked. Elara knelt down and pulled him into a hug. I don't know, but I'll write. Every week. I promise. You better. She held him until he pulled away, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Take care of her, Elara said. I will. And take care of yourself. I'm not a baby. I know. But let me pretend for one more second. He let her. The carriage arrived at dawn on the 7th day. Same driver, same black horses, same sense of finality. Elara stood in the doorway, her trunk at her feet, her mother and brother behind her. Margaretta wasn't there, just the driver, who loaded her trunk without a word and gestured for her to climb in. Elara turned back one last time. Her mother looked stronger, but her eyes were hollow. Thomas stood beside her, his jaw clenched like he was trying not to cry. I love you, her mother said. Elara nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. She climbed into the carriage, the door closed, and the horses started moving. Elara didn't look back. She couldn't. The ride took 4 hours. 4 hours of frozen roads and endless trees, and a silence so complete it felt like the world had forgotten how to make noise. Elara stared out the window, watching the landscape change. The woods thinned, the mountains grew sharper, the snow deepened. And then, finally, the ranch appeared. It sat at the base of a ridge, sprawling and cold and utterly without warmth. The main house was massive, 2 stories of dark wood and stone, smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Barns and outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance, Elara could see cattle moving through the snow. It looked like a fortress, or a prison. The carriage stopped in front of the main house. The driver opened the door. "This way, miss." Elara climbed out, her boots sinking into the snow. The cold hit her immediately, sharper here than it had been at home. The front door opened, and Margareta stepped out. "You're late," she said. "The roads were bad." "They're always bad. Come inside." Elara followed her into the house. The interior was just as cold as the exterior. High ceilings, dark wood, furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable. A fire burned in the main room, but it didn't seem to reach the corners. "Your room is upstairs," Margareta said. "Second door on the left. The ceremony is in an hour. Don't be late." "Where's your son?" "In his study. You'll meet him soon enough." "I'd like to meet him now." Margareta's eyes narrowed. "That's not how this works." "I'm marrying him in an hour. I think I've earned 5 minutes." For a moment, Margareta looked like she might refuse. Then she sighed. "Fine. Follow me." They walked down a long hallway, past closed doors and empty rooms, until they reached a door at the very end. Margareta knocked. No answer. She knocked again. "Rowan," she called. "Your bride is here." Still nothing. Margareta opened the door anyway. The room beyond was dark. Heavy curtains blocked the windows. A desk sat in the corner, covered in papers, and in a chair by the fire, slumped and motionless, sat a man. "Rowan," Margareta said sharply. "Sit up." The man didn't move. Margareta's jaw tightened. "Rowan." Finally, slowly, the man straightened, and Elara saw him for the first time. Rowan Hale. He looked like something the mountains had chewed up and forgotten to spit out. His face was hard, all sharp angles and old scars. His hair was dark and unkempt, streaked with gray despite the fact that he couldn't have been older than 35. But it was his eyes that stopped her. They were empty. Not sad, not angry, just gone. "This is Elara Vance," Margareta said. "Your future wife." Rowan's gaze slid over Elara like she wasn't even there. "Fine," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. "Is that all you have to say?" Margareta demanded. "What do you want me to say?" "How about hello? How about thank you for agreeing to this?" Rowan's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile, or snarl. "Hello," he said flatly. "Thank you for agreeing to this." Margareta exhaled sharply. "You're impossible." "And yet here we are." Elara had heard enough. "Can I speak to him alone?" she asked. Margareta looked surprised. "I don't think—" "Please." For a long moment, Margareta studied her. Then she nodded. 5 minutes, she said. "Then get dressed. Both of you." She left, closing the door behind her. Elara turned to face Rowan. He was watching her now, not with interest, just watching. "So," Elara said, "you're the man I'm supposed to marry." "Apparently." "You don't seem thrilled about it." "I'm not." "That makes 2 of us." Rowan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why are you here?" "Because I didn't have a choice." "Same as you, I'm guessing." He didn't answer. Elara stepped closer. "Your mother said the mountains took something from you. What did she mean?" Rowan's expression went cold. "None of your business." "I'm about to be your wife. I think that makes it my business." "Being my wife doesn't mean you get to know me." "Then what does it mean?" "It means you live here. You don't ask questions, and you stay out of my way." Elara felt her temper flare. "I didn't come here to be ignored." "Then you came to the wrong place." He turned back to the fire, dismissing her. Elara wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand he look at her like she was a person instead of an inconvenience. But she didn't. Instead, she walked to the door, her hand on the handle. "I don't know what happened to you," she said quietly. "And I don't know why you've given up. But I haven't. So if you think I'm just going to disappear into the background, you're wrong." She opened the door. "See you at the ceremony," she said, and she left him sitting there in the dark. The ceremony was short, brutally, painfully short. A minister. A few words. 2 signatures. Rowan stood beside her in a clean shirt and dark coat, his expression blank. He didn't look at her, didn't speak unless prompted. When the minister asked if he took Elara to be his wife, Rowan said yes, like he was confirming a grocery order. When it was Elara's turn, she hesitated, just for a second. Then she said yes, too. The minister pronounced them married. Rowan didn't kiss her. He just turned and walked out. Margareta approached Elara, her expression unreadable. "Welcome to the family," she said. It didn't sound like a welcome. It sounded like a warning. Elara's new room was upstairs at the opposite end of the house from Rowan's study. It was large, clean, impersonal. A bed, a dresser, a window that looked out over the mountains. Her trunk sat at the foot of the bed, already delivered. Elara sat down on the edge of the mattress and stared at the wall. She was married. To a stranger. To a man who looked at her like she was a ghost. Her hands shook. She pressed them together, hard, until they stopped. "Don't cry. Don't you dare cry." A knock at the door. "Come in," Elara said. A young woman entered, maybe a few years older than Elara, with dark hair and a kind face. "I'm Clara," she said. "I work here. Help with the house. Figured you might want some company." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Elara almost laughed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to people who've been paying attention." Clara sat down in the chair by the window. "I know this isn't what you wanted. None of us get what we want around here, but for what it's worth, you seem tougher than the last girl who tried." "There was someone before me?" "Not a wife, just someone Margareta tried to set him up with. Lasted 2 days before she ran off crying." "What happened?" "Rowan happened. He's not exactly welcoming." "I noticed." Clara leaned forward. "Look, I'm not going to lie to you. This place is hard. Rowan's harder. But if you can survive the first month, it gets easier." "Does it?" "No. But you get better at pretending." Elara smiled despite herself. "Thanks, I think." Clara stood. "Dinner's at 6, downstairs. Don't be late or Margareta'll have your head." "Will Rowan be there?" "Probably not. He doesn't eat with the family anymore." "Then where does he eat?" "His study, alone, like always." Clara left, and Elara was alone again. She looked out the window at the mountains, sharp and unforgiving against the sky. This is my life now. The thought didn't scare her as much as it should have, because Elara had survived worse. And if Rowan Hale thought he could break her with silence and distance, he was wrong. She'd been breaking her whole life, and she was still here. Dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as expected. Margareta sat at the head of the table, flanked by Clara and 2 ranch hands Elara didn't know. Rowan's chair sat empty. No one mentioned it. The food was good. Roasted meat, potatoes, bread. More than Elara had seen in months. She ate slowly, trying not to look like she was starving. Margareta watched her the entire time. "You'll start learning the house tomorrow," Margareta said. "Clara will show you around. There are rules here. You'll follow them." "What kind of rules?" "The kind that keep this place running. Rowan's study is off limits unless he invites you. The west barn is for the ranch hands only, and you don't go into the mountains without permission." "Why not?" "Because people die in the mountains, and I won't have you becoming one of them." Elara set down her fork. "I'm not a child." "Then don't act like one." The table went quiet. Elara forced herself to stay calm. "Understood." Margareta nodded. "Good. You're dismissed." Elara stood and left without another word. She climbed the stairs to her room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. Her first day as Rowan Hale's wife. And already she wanted to burn the whole place down. But she didn't. Instead, she unpacked her trunk, hung her dresses, and stared out the window until the sun set and the mountains disappeared into the dark. Somewhere in this house, Rowan was sitting alone. Somewhere in this house, a man had given up. And somewhere deep inside herself, Elara made a decision. She wasn't going to let him stay that way, not because she cared about him, but because if he could give up, so could she, and she refused to give up. Not now, not ever. Tomorrow, things would change, one way or another. Elara woke to the sound of someone chopping wood. The rhythmic thud echoed through the cold morning air, sharp and relentless. She lay in bed for a moment, disoriented, before remembering where she was. The Hale Ranch, her new prison. She dressed quickly, pulling on the warmest clothes she had, and made her way downstairs. The house was quiet except for that constant chopping sound coming from somewhere outside. Clara was in the kitchen, kneading dough at a flour-dusted table. "Morning," Clara said without looking up. "Coffee's on the stove. Help yourself." Elara poured a cup and wrapped her hands around it, grateful for the warmth. "Who's chopping wood?" "Marcus, one of the ranch hands. He's been at it since dawn." "Where's Margareta?" "Out checking the livestock. She'll be back in an hour or so." Clara glanced up. "You sleep all right?" "Not really." "Yeah, that bed's hard as a rock. You'll get used to it." Elara doubted that, but she didn't argue. She sipped her coffee and watched Clara work. The kitchen was the warmest room in the house, and for a moment Elara let herself relax. Then Clara spoke again. "He came down last night." Elara looked up. "Who?" "Rowan. After you went to bed, took some food and went back upstairs." "Did he say anything?" "Not to me. He never does." Elara set down her cup. "How long has he been like this?" Clara stopped kneading and wiped her hands on her apron. 2 years. Maybe a little more. Ever since the attack." "What attack?" Clara hesitated. "You don't know?" "Your employer's not big on explanations." Clara sighed and sat down across from her. "It was a bear. Up in the high country. Rowan was tracking it with some of the men. It had been killing cattle, tearing through fences. They found it near a den, and things went bad fast." She paused, her expression darkening. "The bear got him, tore up his leg, his ribs, damn near killed him. The men got him out, but the damage was done. Doctor said he'd never walk right again, said he was lucky to be alive. And that's when he gave up. That's when he stopped being Rowan Hale." Clara stood and went back to the dough. "Before the attack, he was different, strong, confident. He ran this ranch like he was born to it. Now he just exists." Elara stared into her coffee. "And Margareta thinks a wife is going to fix that?" "She thinks a wife might give him a reason to try. Whether she's right or not." Clara shrugged. "Guess we'll find out." The chopping stopped outside. A moment later, the back door opened and a man stepped in, tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He nodded to Clara, then noticed Elara. "You must be the new Mrs. Hale," he said. "I must be." He extended a hand. "Marcus, I manage the livestock." Elara shook it. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. "Elara, welcome to the ranch. It's good to have someone new around here." "Is it?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Better than the alternative." He grabbed a piece of bread from the counter and headed back outside, leaving Elara alone with Clara again. "He's one of the good ones," Clara said. "Most of the hands are. They keep to themselves, do their work, don't cause trouble." "And Rowan? Does he work with them?" "Not anymore. He used to. Now he just hides in that study and pretends the rest of the world doesn't exist." Elara finished her coffee and set the cup down. "Where is it?" "Where's what?" "The study." Clara's eyes widened. "You're not thinking of going in there?" "Why not?" "Because Margareta said—" "I don't care what Margareta said. He's my husband. I think I'm allowed to talk to him." Clara looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she pointed down the hallway. "End of the hall, last door on the left. But don't say I didn't warn you." Elara walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. She reached the door and paused, her hand hovering over the handle. "What are you doing?" She didn't have an answer. She knocked. No response. She knocked again, harder this time. "Go away." Rowan's voice came from inside. Elara opened the door anyway. The room was dim, the curtains still drawn. Rowan sat at his desk, papers scattered in front of him, a pen in his hand. He didn't look up. "I said go away." "I heard you," Elara said. "I'm ignoring you." That got his attention. He looked up, his expression somewhere between irritation and disbelief. "You're not supposed to be in here. And you're not supposed to be hiding from your own life, but here we are." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Get out." "No." "Excuse me?" "I said no." Elara stepped further into the room. "We're married. That means we live in the same house. That means we're going to see each other. So you can either accept that, or you can keep sulking in the dark like a child." Rowan stood abruptly, and for the first time, Elara saw the full extent of his injuries. He moved stiffly, favoring his right leg. His left side seemed weaker, like it couldn't quite support his weight. But it was the way he held himself, rigid, guarded, like every movement hurt, that told the real story. "You don't know anything about me," Rowan said. "Then tell me." "Why would I do that?" "Because I'm your wife, whether you like it or not." Rowan laughed bitterly. "You think that means something? You think because some minister said a few words we're supposed to be partners? I think it means we're stuck with each other, so we might as well figure out how to survive it." "I was surviving fine before you got here." "No, you weren't. You were dying slowly, and everyone in this house knows it." Rowan's expression went cold. "Get out. Make me." They stared at each other, the tension thick enough to choke on. Finally, Rowan turned away. "You're wasting your time." "Maybe, but it's my time to waste." She left before he could respond, closing the door behind her. Her hands were shaking. She'd pushed him, hard, and she didn't know if that was brave or stupid, probably both. Clara was waiting in the hallway, her eyes wide. "Well?" she asked. "He's an ass," Elara said. Clara almost smiled. "Told you." "But he's not dead, not yet." "What's that supposed to mean?" Elara didn't answer. She wasn't sure herself. But something had shifted in that room. Something small and fragile and dangerous. Rowan Hale wasn't as empty as he wanted people to believe, and Elara was going to prove it. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of chores and instructions. Clara showed her around the house, where things were kept, how things were done, what Margareta expected. It was overwhelming and exhausting, but Elara forced herself to pay attention. By midday, she was ready to collapse. "Lunch is at noon," Clara said. "Margareta expects everyone at the table." "Does that include Rowan?" "It's supposed to, but he hasn't shown up in months." Elara wasn't surprised. Lunch was quieter than dinner had been. Just Margareta, Clara, and Elara. The food was simple, soup and bread, but it was hot and filling. Margareta watched Elara eat with the same calculating gaze as the night before. "Clara tells me you went into Rowan's study this morning," Margareta said. Elara didn't flinch. "I did. I told you it was off limits. You told me not to go in unless he invited me. I knocked. That counts as asking permission." Margareta's eyes narrowed. "Don't twist my words, girl." "Then don't treat me like a servant. I'm your daughter-in-law, not your maid." The room went silent. Clara looked like she wanted to disappear. Margareta leaned back in her chair, studying Elara with something that might have been respect or rage. It was hard to tell. "You've got fire," Margareta said, finally. "That's good. You'll need it if you're going to survive here." "I've survived worse." "Have you?" Elara met her gaze. "Yes." Margareta nodded slowly. "We'll see." After lunch, Clara pulled Elara aside. "Are you trying to get yourself kicked out?" Clara hissed. "She doesn't scare me." "She should. Margareta doesn't tolerate disrespect." "Then she shouldn't dish it out." Clara sighed. "You're either brave or insane." "Probably both." That afternoon, Elara found herself alone again. Clara had work to do, Margareta had disappeared somewhere outside, and Rowan was still locked in his study. Elara wandered through the house, exploring rooms she hadn't seen yet. Most were empty or unused, filled with old furniture and dust. But one room caught her attention. It was smaller than the others, tucked away at the end of the second floor. The door was slightly ajar, and when Elara pushed it open, she found herself in what looked like a library. Shelves lined the walls, packed with books. A desk sat by the window, covered in maps and charts, and on the far wall, hanging above the fireplace, was a painting. It showed a man on horseback, tall and strong, riding through the mountains with the kind of confidence that came from knowing the land like the back of his hand. Elara stepped closer. The man in the painting had Rowan's face, younger, unbroken, alive in a way the real Rowan wasn't anymore. That was a long time ago. Elara spun around. Rowan stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on a cane she hadn't noticed before. "I didn't hear you," Elara said. "You weren't supposed to be in here." "Seems like I'm not supposed to be anywhere in this house." Rowan limped into the room, his movement slow and deliberate. He stopped in front of the painting, staring up at it like he was looking at a stranger. "That's who I used to be," he said quietly. "What happened?" "You know what happened. Clara told you." "I know about the attack. I don't know what it did to you." Rowan's jaw clenched. "It took everything, my strength. my mobility, my future. Your future's not over, isn't it? He turned to face her. Look at me. I can barely walk. I can't ride. I can't work. I'm useless. You're not useless. Then what am I? Scared. The word landed like a punch. Rowan's expression darkened. Get out. No. I'm not asking. And I'm not leaving. Elara stepped closer. You're scared that if you try and fail, it'll prove you're broken. So instead, you don't try at all. You just sit in that study and wait for the world to forget you existed. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Elara's voice rose. I spent my entire life watching my mother give up, watching her fade into nothing because she couldn't see a way forward. And you know what? It didn't kill her, but it might as well have, because she stopped living long before she stopped breathing. Rowan flinched. I'm not going to watch you do the same thing, Elara said. I didn't come here to marry a ghost. Then why did you come here? Because I didn't have a choice. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to let you waste away just because it's easier than fighting. Rowan stared at her, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. You don't understand, he said finally. Then help me understand. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he turned back to the painting. I was 23 when that was painted, he said. I'd just taken over the ranch. My father had died the year before, and everyone said I was too young, too reckless. But I proved them wrong. I worked harder than anyone, learned every inch of this land, became the best tracker in the mountains. He paused. And then one day, I wasn't. Because of the bear? Because I got careless. I thought I was invincible. I thought nothing could touch me. His voice broke. I was wrong. Elara didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just stood there, listening. The bear didn't just hurt me, Rowan continued. It showed me the truth, that I wasn't special, that I wasn't untouchable, that everything I thought I was a lie. It wasn't a lie, Elara said softly. Yes, it was. No. You were that man, and you can be him again. Rowan shook his head. You don't get it. That man is gone. Then become someone new. He looked at her, his eyes hollow. What if I can't? Then you can't. But at least you'll have tried. Rowan turned away. Leave me alone. Elara wanted to push, to demand he listen. But she didn't. She'd said enough. She left the library and walked back to her room, her chest tight. She'd gotten through to him. She knew she had. But whether it was enough, that was a different question. That night, Elara skipped dinner. She wasn't hungry, and she didn't have the energy to deal with Margaretta's stares or Clara's concern. Instead, she sat by the window in her room, watching the snow fall. It was quiet, peaceful almost. But beneath the quiet, Elara could feel something building, a storm. Not in the sky, but in this house. And she was right in the middle of it. A knock at the door startled her. Come in, she called. Clara stepped inside, carrying a tray with bread and soup. Thought you might be hungry, Clara said. I'm fine. No, you're not. But eat anyway. Elara took the tray and set it on the small table by the window. Clara sat down on the bed, her expression thoughtful. You talked to him again, didn't you? Clara asked. How'd you know? Because he came down for dinner. Elara's head snapped up. He what? Sat at the table. Didn't say much, but he was there, first time in months. Elara felt something shift in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or something close to it. What did Margaretta say? Nothing, but she looked surprised, in a good way. Clara stood and walked to the door, then paused. Whatever you're doing, she said, keep doing it. He needs it. What if I'm making things worse? Then they'll get worse. But at least something's happening. Clara left and Elara ate her soup in silence. She didn't know if she was helping or hurting, but for the first time since she'd arrived, she felt like she wasn't completely powerless. The next few days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Elara woke early, helped Clara with the house, and avoided Margaretta as much as possible. Rowan remained distant, but he started appearing at meals. He didn't talk, didn't engage, but he was there. It was progress. Small, fragile progress. But it was something. One morning, Marcus found Elara in the kitchen. Mrs. Hale, he said. Got a minute? Sure, and call me Elara. He smiled. Elara then. I was wondering if you'd like to see the horses. The horses? We've got about a dozen. Fine animals. Thought you might like to meet them. Elara hesitated. She hadn't been on a horse in years, but she nodded. All right. Marcus led her to the barn, a massive structure that smelled like hay and leather, and something earthy Elara couldn't name. The horses were beautiful, strong and healthy, with coats that gleamed even in the dim light. This one's Juniper, Marcus said, stopping in front of a chestnut mare. She's gentle, good for beginners. Elara reached out and touched the mare's nose. Juniper nickered softly, her breath warm against Elara's hand. She likes you, Marcus said. How can you tell? She didn't bite you. Elara laughed despite herself. They spent the next hour walking through the barn, Marcus introducing her to each horse and telling her their quirks and personalities. It was the most relaxed Elara had felt since arriving. You ever ride? Marcus asked. A little, when I was younger. Want to try again? Elara looked at Juniper. The mare watched her with calm, intelligent eyes. Maybe, Elara said. Let me know when you're ready. I'll saddle her up for you. That evening, Rowan came down for dinner again. This time, he sat across from Elara instead of at the far end of the table. Margareta noticed but didn't comment. They ate in silence for a while. The only sound, the scrape of forks against plates. Then Rowan spoke. Marcus said you met the horses. Elara looked up, surprised. I did. Which one did you like? Juniper. Rowan nodded. She's a good horse. Steady. He said I could ride her if I wanted. Do you? I don't know yet. Rowan went back to his food and Elara thought that was the end of it. But then he spoke again. I could teach you, if you want. The offer hung in the air like smoke. Elara stared at him. You'd do that? I used to teach all the new hands, before... He trailed off. Before the attack? Yeah. Elara set down her fork. All right, teach me. Rowan looked up, and for the first time Elara saw something other than emptiness in his eyes. Surprise. Maybe even a flicker of interest. Tomorrow morning, he said, early, before the sun's up. Why so early? Because I don't want an audience. Elara understood that. All right, she said. Tomorrow. That night, Elara lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Something had shifted again. Rowan was still guarded, still broken, but he was trying, and that was more than she'd expected. She fell asleep thinking about horses and mountains and a man who was slowly, painfully learning how to live again. The next morning, Elara woke before dawn. She dressed quickly and made her way to the barn, her breath misting in the cold air. Rowan was already there, standing beside Juniper. He'd saddled her, and the mare stood patiently, waiting. You're late, Rowan said. The sun's not even up yet. I said early. Elara bit back a smile. My mistake. Rowan gestured to the horse. Come here. Elara approached, and Rowan began explaining the basics. How to hold the reins, how to sit, how to guide the horse with gentle pressure. His voice was calm, patient, almost kind. It was strange hearing him talk like this, like a teacher instead of a ghost. Ready to try? He asked. I think so. Rowan helped her into the saddle, his hands steady despite the tremor Elara could see in his left arm. She settled onto Juniper's back, the world suddenly much higher than it had been. Relax, Rowan said. She can feel your tension. Elara took a breath and loosened her grip on the reins. Good. Now gently press your heels into her sides, not hard, just enough to let her know you want to move. Elara did. Juniper started walking, slow and steady. Elara's heart raced, but she kept her breathing even. That's it, Rowan said, walking beside them. You're doing fine. They circled the paddock twice before Rowan told her to stop. Elara pulled gently on the reins, and Juniper halted. How was it? Rowan asked. Terrifying. He almost smiled. It gets easier. Elara climbed down, her legs shaky. Same time tomorrow? She asked. Rowan hesitated, then nodded. Same time. Over the next week, the lessons continued. Each morning, Elara woke before dawn and met Rowan in the barn. He taught her how to trot, how to turn, how to read the horse's body language, and slowly something changed between them. They talked. Not about anything deep or personal, but about the horses, the ranch, the weather. It was enough. One morning, after a particularly good ride, Rowan leaned against the fence and watched Elara brush Juniper down. "You're getting better," he said. "Thanks to you. You're doing the work. I'm just pointing you in the right direction." Elara looked at him. "Why did you agree to this? The lessons, I mean." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. "Because you were right," he said finally. "About what?" "About me being scared." Elara stopped brushing and turned to face him. "I've been hiding," Rowan continued, "from everyone, from everything, and I thought that was easier, but it's not. It's just slower." "Slower than what?" "Than dying." The words hit hard. Elara set down the brush and walked over to him. "You're not dying," she said. "I was, before you got here." "And now?" Rowan looked at her, and for the first time Elara saw something real in his eyes. Not hope. Not yet. But possibility. "Now I don't know," he said. It wasn't much, but it was more than he'd given anyone in 2 years. And for Elara, that was enough. The morning rides became routine, and with routine came something neither of them had expected. Conversation. Real conversation. Not the stilted exchanges from those first days, but actual talk about things that mattered. One morning, after Elara had successfully cantered Juniper around the paddock without losing her balance, Rowan asked her about her family. "Your brother," he said. "Thomas. How old is he?" Elara was surprised by the question. 8, almost 9. "You miss him?" "Every day." Rowan nodded, his gaze distant. "I had a brother too. Younger, like yours." "Had?" "Fever took him when he was 12. I was 17. Elara dismounted and led Juniper to the water trough. "I'm sorry." It was a long time ago. "Doesn't make it easier." Rowan leaned against the fence, favoring his bad leg the way he always did when he'd been standing too long. "No, it doesn't." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound Juniper drinking and the distant call of a hawk somewhere up in the mountains. "You write to him?" Rowan asked. "Your brother?" "I promised I would. Every week." "Have you?" Elara felt her chest tighten. "Not yet. I don't know what to say." "Tell him you're all right. That's all he needs to hear." "Am I? All right?" Rowan looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. "I think you're trying to be," he said. That afternoon, Elara sat down at the small desk in her room and pulled out a piece of paper. She stared at it for a long time before finally writing. "Dear Thomas, I know I'm late writing. I'm sorry. Things have been strange here, but not bad. The ranch is big and cold, but there are good people. Clara works in the house, and she reminds me of you, always asking questions. Marcus manages the livestock, and he let me meet the horses. I've been learning to ride. You'd like it here, I think. There's snow everywhere and mountains so tall they look like they're holding up the sky. Mama's medicine is working, isn't it? Tell her I'm doing fine. Tell her not to worry. I miss you. Write back when you can. Love, Elara." She sealed the letter and left it on Clara's desk to be mailed with the next supply run. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The days grew colder as winter settled in hard. The ranch hands worked longer hours keeping the livestock fed and the buildings maintained. Margareta moved through the house like a general inspecting troops, and Rowan continued showing up for meals, though he still said little. But the morning rides continued, and that was where the real changes happened. One morning, nearly 3 weeks after the lessons had started, Rowan brought out a different horse. Not Juniper, a tall, dark stallion with wild eyes and a coat black as midnight. "This is Flint," Rowan said. Elara stared at the horse. "He looks mean." "He's not mean. He's honest. If you do something stupid, he'll let you know." "And you want me to ride him?" "No, I want you to watch me ride him." Elara's breath caught. "You can't." "I can, or I'm going to try." Marcus appeared from the barn, leading Flint carefully. The stallion tossed his head, clearly unhappy about the early hour. "You sure about this, boss?" Marcus asked, his voice low. "No," Rowan said, but I'm doing it anyway. Marcus helped saddle Flint while Rowan stood to the side, his jaw clenched so tight Elara could see the muscle jumping. When everything was ready, Marcus held the horse steady. Rowan approached slowly, his cane digging into the frozen ground with each step. "Rowan," Elara said, "you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He reached Flint and ran a hand along the horse's neck. The stallion calmed slightly, recognizing his touch. Then Rowan gripped the saddle. The first attempt failed. His bad leg wouldn't support the weight, and he stumbled backward. Marcus caught him before he fell. "Easy," Marcus said. Rowan shook him off. Again. The second attempt was worse. He got his foot in the stirrup, but when he tried to pull himself up, his left arm gave out and he crashed against the horse's side. Flint sidestepped nervously. "Rowan, stop," Elara said. "No." "You're going to hurt yourself." "I'm already hurt. What's a little more?" The third attempt nearly succeeded. He got himself halfway up before his leg buckled and he had to drop back down. He stood there, breathing hard, his face pale. "Maybe that's enough for today," Marcus said gently. "No?" Rowan's voice was steel. "One more time." Elara wanted to intervene, wanted to pull him away from the horse and make him stop before he broke something worse. But she didn't, because she understood. This wasn't about riding a horse. This was about proving to himself that he could still do something, anything. Rowan gripped the saddle again. This time he didn't rush. He took his time positioning his good leg, finding his balance, adjusting his grip. Then he pulled. It wasn't graceful. His movements were jerky, his breathing labored, but inch by inch he hauled himself up, and then he was in the saddle. Sitting upright on Flint's back, his hands shaking on the reins. Marcus stepped back, his expression somewhere between shock and pride. Elara couldn't breathe. Rowan sat there for a long moment, just feeling the horse beneath him. Then slowly, carefully, he pressed his heels into Flint's sides. The stallion started walking. It was only a few steps, maybe 10 yards before Rowan pulled him to a stop. But it was enough. When Rowan dismounted, more of a controlled fall than anything elegant, his legs nearly gave out. Marcus caught him again, and this time Rowan didn't push him away. "You did it," Marcus said, his voice thick. Rowan didn't respond. He just stood there, leaning on Marcus, his chest heaving. Elara walked over to them, her own hands shaking. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen," she said. Rowan looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. A real smile. Small and crooked and exhausted, but real. "Probably," he said. "You could have broken your neck. But I didn't. You could have— Elara." He straightened up, wincing. "I rode. For the first time in 2 years, I got on a horse, and I rode." The weight of that statement hung in the cold morning air. "I know," Elara said softly. Rowan's smile faded, but something remained in his eyes. Something she hadn't seen before. Hope. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For pushing me. For not letting me quit." Elara felt her throat tighten. "You did the hard part." "No, you did. I was just too stubborn to admit it." Marcus cleared his throat. "I'm going to take Flint back to the barn. Give you two some space." He led the stallion away, leaving Elara and Rowan alone in the paddock. The sun was starting to rise, painting the mountains in shades of gold and orange. "What now?" Elara asked. "Now I do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, until it doesn't hurt as much." "And if it always hurts? Then I learn to live with it." Rowan turned to face her fully. "That's what you've been trying to tell me, isn't it? That broken doesn't mean finished." Something like that. "You were right." Elara didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. They walked back to the house together, slower than usual because Rowan was limping worse than normal. But he didn't complain, didn't ask for help. He just kept moving. When they reached this kitchen, Clara was already there preparing breakfast. She took one look at Rowan's flushed face and Elara's expression and stopped what she was doing. "What happened?" she asked. "He rode," Elara said. Clara's eyes widened. "You what?" "I rode Flint. Just a few steps, but I did it." Clara set down her knife and walked over to him. For a moment, Elara thought she might hug him. Instead, she just smiled. "About damn time," Clara said. Rowan laughed. An actual laugh. Rough and unused, but genuine. Yeah, he said. It was. Margareta found out later that morning. Elara was in the library when she heard raised voices coming from somewhere downstairs. She made her way to the main hall and found Margareta standing in the doorway of Rowan's study. You could have killed yourself, Margareta was saying, her voice sharp. But I didn't, Rowan replied, his tone surprisingly calm. You fell off a horse 2 years ago and nearly died, and now you're just going to climb back on like nothing happened? I didn't fall off. I got dragged off by a bear. There's a difference. Don't be clever with me, Rowan. I'm not being clever. I'm being honest. Elara hesitated at the top of the stairs, unsure whether to intervene or stay hidden. Margareta's voice dropped. I watched you give up, Rowan. I watched you disappear into this study and stop caring whether you lived or died. And now suddenly you're riding horses again? Yes. Why? Because I'm tired of being afraid. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Margareta was silent for a long moment. Then she said, Is this because of her? Maybe. Does it matter? It might. Well, it shouldn't. I'm doing this for me, not for anyone else. Another pause. You're going to get hurt again, Margareta said, her voice softer now. Probably. And when you do? Then I'll deal with it. Same way I dealt with the bear. You almost didn't survive the bear. Keyword being almost. Elara heard Margareta sigh. You're as stubborn as your father was, Margareta said. You say that like it's a bad thing. It is when it gets you killed. I'm not going to die, Mother. You don't know that. Neither do you. Footsteps. Then the study door closed, and Margareta emerged into the hallway. She looked up and saw Elara standing on the stairs. They stared at each other for a moment. You put this idea in his head, Margareta said. It wasn't a question. He put it in his own head. I just reminded him it was there. Margareta walked to the base of the stairs, her expression unreadable. Do you understand what you're doing? I'm helping my husband. You're giving him false hope. There's no such thing as false hope. There's just hope. Margareta studied her. You really believe that? Yes. Then you're either braver than I thought or more foolish. Maybe both. Margareta almost smiled. Almost. Come with me, she said. Elara followed her to a small room off the kitchen that Elara had never been in before. It was clearly Margareta's private space, a desk, a chair, shelves lined with ledgers and papers. Margareta pulled out a leather-bound book and opened it to a page marked with a ribbon. This was my husband's, she said, pointing to an entry. He kept records of everything, the ranch, the livestock, the land, and the people. Elara looked at the page. It was a list of names, each with notes beside them. There, Margareta said, pointing to one name. Rowan Hale, born 1791, strong, capable, fearless to a fault. Below that, in different handwriting, Margareta's, Elara guessed, was another entry. Bear attack, 1824, survived, changed. I added that, Margareta said, 2 weeks after he stopped coming out of his study, because I needed to mark the moment my son became someone I didn't recognize. Elara looked up at her. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to understand something. Rowan didn't just lose his body in that attack. He lost his identity. Everything he thought he was, strong, capable, fearless, was gone, and what you're asking him to do now is terrifying for him. I know that. Do you? Because if you're just doing this to prove a point, or because you think you can fix him like he's some kind of project, then you need to stop. Now. Elara felt anger flare in her chest. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? I'm giving him a reason to try. That's all. Margareta closed the book. And when he fails? When he falls off that horse, or injures himself worse than before? What then? Then he gets back up, or he doesn't, but at least he'll know he tried. That's not good enough. It's all we have. They stared at each other, the tension thick between them. Finally, Margareta set the book aside. You care about him. It wasn't a question, but Elara answered anyway. I'm starting to. Why? Because he's trying, and that's more than most people do. Margareta nodded slowly. All right, but if this goes wrong, It's on you." "I know." Margareta walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope you're right. I'd like my son back." "He never left. He's just been hiding." "From what?" "Himself." Margareta left without another word. Elara stayed in the room for a few minutes, staring at the closed ledger. She knew the risk, knew that pushing Rowan might break him instead of heal him, but she also knew that doing nothing would kill him just as surely. So she'd keep pushing and hope it was enough. That evening, dinner was different. Rowan sat at the table, but instead of eating in silence, he actually engaged in conversation. "The north pasture fence needs repair," he told Marcus. "I noticed it this morning." Marcus looked surprised. "I'll get the boys on it tomorrow." "No need, I'll help." The table went quiet. "You sure about that, boss?" Marcus asked carefully. "I can swing a hammer. Legs got nothing to do with it." Marcus glanced at Margareta, who was watching Rowan with an expression Elara couldn't quite read. "All right," Marcus said. "We'll head out after breakfast." Rowan nodded and went back to his food. Elara caught Clara's eye across the table. Clara looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't know what. After dinner, Rowan asked Elara to walk with him. They went outside, into the cold night air, and stood on the porch looking out at the mountains. "I wanted to thank you," Rowan said, "for earlier, for not trying to stop me. I wanted to." "I know, but you didn't. That meant something." Elara pulled her coat tighter against the wind. "What happens now?" "I keep trying, see how far I can push before something breaks. And if something does break, then I'll deal with it." He turned to look at her. "You know, when my mother first told me about the arrangement, I was furious, thought she was trying to control my life, force me into something I didn't want. Weren't you right?" "Partially, but I was also wrong, because you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd pity me, try to fix me, treat me like I was made of glass." "And I didn't do that?" "No. You treated me like I was still a person, even when I wasn't acting like one." Elara didn't know how to respond to that. "I'm not good at this," Rowan continued. "Being open, talking about things that matter. But I'm trying. I can see that. And I want you to know, this marriage, it doesn't have to be what either of us thought it would be." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe we can make it something better, something we both choose." Elara's heart beat faster. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know yet, but I think it might be." They stood in silence for a while, the wind howling around them, the mountains dark against the starlit sky. "I should write to Thomas," Elara said eventually. "Tell him about the horses. Tell him about Flint. He'd probably think that's worth hearing about." Elara smiled. "He would." She started to go inside, but Rowan's voice stopped her. "Elara?" She turned back. "I'm glad you're here," he said. "I didn't think I would be, but I am." The words settled over her like a blanket. "Me too," she said. And for the first time since arriving at the ranch, she meant it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and change. Rowan worked on the fence with Marcus and the other hands, moving slower than he once had, but refusing to quit. He rode Flint every morning, the sessions getting longer each time, and he started coming out of his study more, joining conversations, making decisions about the ranch. It wasn't easy. There were days when the pain was too much and he had to retreat. Days when his frustration boiled over and he lashed out at everyone around him. But he kept going, and Elara kept pushing. One afternoon, she found him in the library poring over old maps of the mountain trails. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Planning a route." "For what?" He looked up at her, and she saw something dangerous in his eyes, something wild. "I want to ride into the mountains," he said. "Really ride, not just circles in the paddock." Elara's stomach dropped. "Rowan, that's crazy, reckless, stupid, all of those things. Probably, but I need to do it." "Why?" He set down the map. "Because that's where it happened, the attack. And I haven't been back since. I've been avoiding those mountains like they're cursed." "Maybe they are. Or maybe I'm just a coward." "You're not a coward." "Then prove it with me. Come with me." Elara stared at him. "You want me to ride into the mountains? With you?" "Yes. I've only been riding for a few weeks. I'm not ready for—" "You're ready enough. And I need someone with me, someone who won't try to talk me out of it if things get hard. What about Marcus? Marcus will try to protect me. You won't. Elara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him this was insane and dangerous and exactly the kind of thing that could get them both killed. But she looked at his face and saw the determination there. This wasn't about conquering the mountains. It was about conquering the fear. When? She asked. 3 days. That'll give me time to make sure we have the right supplies. And if Margareta finds out? She will, and she'll try to stop us. But we're going anyway. Elara took a breath. All right, 3 days. Rowan smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when we get back alive. Deal. Margareta did find out, of course. 2 days before they were set to leave, she cornered Elara in the hallway. You're going with him, she said flatly. Yes. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? Some. But he needs to do this. He needs to stay alive. That's what he needs. He's not living right now. He's just existing. There's a difference. Margareta's jaw clenched. If something happens to him, then it happens. But at least he'll have tried. And you? What happens if something happens to you? Elara hadn't really thought about that. She'd been so focused on Rowan, on helping him, that her own safety had become an afterthought. I'll be careful, she said. That's not good enough. It's all I can offer. Margareta studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed. You're just like him, stubborn and reckless and too damn proud to admit when you're in over your head. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Margareta started to walk away, then stopped. Take the rifle, she said, the one in the study, and make sure you know how to use it. I do. Good. Because if a bear comes at you, you won't have time to figure it out. She left Elara standing in the hallway, her heart pounding. This was really happening. They were really going into the mountains, and Elara had no idea if they'd come back. The morning they left, the sky was the color of old bruises. Elara woke before dawn, her stomach twisted in knots. She dressed in layers, wool pants, 2 shirts, a heavy coat that had belonged to someone else before her. Her hands shook as she laced her boots. This was real. They were actually doing this. When she came downstairs, Claire was already in the kitchen, packing food into saddlebags. You don't have to do this, you know, Clara said without looking up. Yes, I do. Why? Because he asked? Because he needs it. Clara finally looked at her. What about what you need? Elara didn't have an answer for that. Clara finished packing and handed her the bags. There's dried meat, bread, some cheese. It'll last you 3 days if you're careful. The water skins are already filled. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just come back alive. Elara took the bags and headed to the barn, where Rowan was already saddling the horses. Flint and Juniper, both restless in the cold morning air. You ready? Rowan asked. No, but I'm going anyway. He almost smiled. That's the spirit? Marcus appeared from the shadows, carrying the rifle Margareta had mentioned. Boss, he said, handing it to Rowan, you remember how to use this? I'm crippled, not senile. Just checking. Rowan secured the rifle to his saddle, then turned to Elara. You know how to shoot? Well enough. Well enough to hit something if you need to? I guess we'll find out. Marcus helped them finish loading the supplies, his expression grim. You know this is insane, right? Been told that already, Rowan said. And you're going anyway? Yes. Marcus shook his head. Your father would have knocked some sense into you. My father's dead, and he never let fear stop him from doing anything. Your father died at 42 because he took too many risks. Rowan's jaw tightened. Then I guess it runs in the family. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Instead, he turned to Elara. Keep an eye on him, Marcus said. He's stubborn, but he's not stupid, usually. I'll do my best. They mounted their horses just as the sun started breaking over the eastern ridge. The light was pale and weak, doing nothing to warm the frozen air. Margareta stood on the porch, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Rowan guided Flint over to her. I'll be back in 3 days, he said. You better be. And if I'm not? Then I'll assume you're dead and start planning your funeral. It should have been a joke, but Margareta's voice was flat. Rowan leaned down slightly. I know you're scared, but I need to do this. I'm not scared. I'm practical. There's a difference. If you say so. Margaretta's expression softened just a fraction. Come back, Rowan. Please. I will. He straightened and guided Flint toward the trail. Elara followed on Juniper, her heart hammering against her ribs. They rode in silence for the first hour, following a narrow path that wound between towering pines. The snow was deep here, untouched except for animal tracks. The world felt hushed, like it was holding its breath. Elara kept glancing at Rowan, watching for signs of pain or exhaustion, but he rode steady, his focus locked on the trail ahead. How far are we going? She asked finally. There's a clearing about 10 miles north. We'll camp there tonight. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we go higher. How much higher? High enough. Elara didn't press. She could tell by the set of his shoulders that he was already pushing himself hard. The trail grew steeper as the morning wore on. Juniper struggled in places, her hooves slipping on ice-covered rocks. Elara had to concentrate on every step, on keeping her balance, on not thinking about how far they could fall if the horse stumbled. Around midday, they stopped to rest. Rowan dismounted slowly, wincing as his bad leg took his weight. He leaned against a tree, breathing hard. You all right? Elara asked. Fine. You don't look fine. I said, I'm fine. Elara handed him the water skin and he drank deeply, his hands trembling slightly. How much further to the clearing? She asked. Few more hours. We're making good time. Are we? He looked at her. You having second thoughts? About a dozen, but I'm still here. Why? Because you'd go alone if I didn't come, and that's stupider than both of us going. Rowan smiled despite himself. Can't argue with that logic. They ate some of the dried meat and bread, neither of them talking much. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was the kind of quiet that comes from shared purpose. When they started riding again, the trail narrowed even more. The trees pressed closer, and the mountains loomed overhead like silent giants. Elara tried not to think about what had happened to Rowan in these mountains. Tried not to picture him being dragged off his horse by a bear, his body broken and bleeding. But the images came anyway. Stop, Rowan said suddenly. Elara pulled Juniper to a halt. What's wrong? Rowan was staring at something off to the left. Elara followed his gaze and saw tracks in the snow. Large tracks, with claw marks. Bear? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elk. Old tracks, probably a few days, but stay alert. They continued, but now Elara's nerves were on fire. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like a threat. The wind picked up as afternoon turned toward evening, cutting through Elara's coat like it wasn't even there. Her fingers went numb even inside her gloves, and her face felt like it had been scrubbed raw. How much farther? She called to Rowan. Another mile, maybe less, but that mile felt like 10. The cold was relentless, and Juniper was getting tired, her steps becoming heavier and less sure. When they finally reached the clearing, Elara wanted to cry with relief. The clearing was bigger than Elara had expected, a wide, flat space surrounded by trees with a small frozen stream cutting through the middle. The snow here was pristine, untouched by anything except the wind. Rowan dismounted and immediately started setting up camp. Elara helped, her fingers numb despite her gloves. They worked in silence, each knowing their role without needing to discuss it. They built a fire using deadwood Rowan found at the edge of the clearing. The flames caught quickly, throwing orange light across the snow. Elara sat close to the fire, warming her hands. Rowan sat across from her, his face drawn with exhaustion. You should rest, Elara said. So should you. I will. After you do. He didn't argue. He just leaned back against his saddle and closed his eyes. Elara watched him for a while, studying his face in the firelight. The lines around his eyes were deeper than they'd been weeks ago. The gray in his hair seemed more pronounced. But there was something else too, a strength that hadn't been there before. A determination. She pulled out the letter she'd started writing to Thomas days ago. She added a few more lines by firelight. We're in the mountains now. It's colder than I thought it would be, and the trail is steep. But Rowan's doing better than I expected. He's strong, even if he doesn't believe it himself. Sometimes I think the hardest battles we fight are the ones against ourselves, the ones where we have to decide if we're worth saving. Rowan's fighting that battle now. And I think he's winning. She folded the letter and tucked it away. When she looked up, Rowan's eyes were open, watching her. Who are you writing to? He asked. Thomas? What are you telling him? The truth. That I'm all right. That you're not as terrible as I thought you'd be. Rowan huffed. High praise. Don't let it go to your head. They fell quiet again, the fire crackling between them. Can I ask you something? Rowan said after a while. Sure. Do you regret it? Coming here? Elara thought about it, really thought about it. I regretted it at first, she said. I was angry. At my mother, at your mother, at you, at the whole situation. And now? Now, I don't know. It's still hard, but it doesn't feel like a prison anymore. What does it feel like? Like a challenge, one I might actually be able to win. Rowan nodded slowly. I can understand that. The temperature dropped as night settled in fully. Even with the fire, the cold was brutal. They stayed by the flames until the cold became unbearable, then retreated to the small tent Rowan had set up. It was cramped, barely big enough for both of them, but it blocked the wind. Elara lay on one side, Rowan on the other, a careful distance between them. Thank you, Rowan said into the darkness. For what? For coming with me, for believing I could do this. You're doing it. I'm just along for the ride. It's more than that, and you know it. Elara didn't respond. She just closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come easy. Every sound outside the tent made her heart race. The wind, the creak of tree branches, the distant howl of something wild. Eventually, exhaustion won, and she drifted off. She woke to Rowan shaking her shoulder. What? Shh. Listen. Elara went still. At first she heard nothing. Then, faint and distant, came a sound that made her blood run cold, a low, rumbling growl. Bear? She whispered. Maybe. Or wolf. Hard to tell. Rowan was already reaching for the rifle, his movements careful and quiet. The growl came again, closer this time. Elara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Rowan moved to the tent entrance and peered out. Elara grabbed her coat and followed. Outside, the fire had burned down to embers, barely glowing in the darkness. And at the edge of the clearing, just visible in the faint moonlight, was a shape, large, dark, moving slowly toward them. Stay behind me, Rowan said, raising the rifle. Elara didn't argue. The shape moved closer, its breath visible in the frozen air. Rowan's finger hovered over the trigger. Then the shape stepped into the dying firelight, and Elara nearly laughed with relief. It was an elk, a massive bull elk with antlers that spread like tree branches. Rowan lowered the rifle slowly. Well, that's not what I expected. The elk watched them for a moment, then turned and disappeared back into the trees. Elara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. I thought we were dead. So did I. They went back into the tent, but neither of them slept much after that. When morning came, they broke camp quickly and started riding again. The second day was harder than the first. The trail grew steeper, the air thinner. Rowan's movements became slower, more labored, but he didn't complain, didn't ask to stop. Elara wanted to tell him to rest, to turn back before they went too far. But she knew he wouldn't listen. Around noon, they stopped at a narrow stream to water the horses and refill their water skins. Rowan dismounted and immediately sat down on a fallen log, his breathing ragged. Talk to me, Elara said, sitting beside him. Tell me what you're feeling. Pain. Lots of it. Where? Everywhere, but mostly my leg and ribs. Do you need to stop? We can camp here, rest for a few hours. No, we keep going. Rowan, I said no. His voice was sharp, cutting. Then he seemed to catch himself. I'm sorry. I need to keep moving. If I stop now, I might not start again. Elara understood that fear. The fear that if you paused, if you let yourself acknowledge how hard things were, you'd never find the strength to continue. All right, she said. But you tell me if it gets too bad. Promise me. I promise. They rode for 3 more hours, the landscape growing more dramatic with every mile. The trees thinned out, replaced by sheer rock faces and narrow ridges that made Elara's stomach drop just looking at them. The path they followed was barely wide enough for the horses, with steep drops on one side that fell away into nothing. Juniper moved carefully, her instincts keeping them safe. But Elara's hands were white-knuckled on the reins, and her breath came in short, shallow gasps. "Don't look down," Rowan called back to her. "Keep your eyes on the trail." Easy for you to say. I've done this trail 100 times. Trust me. Elara tried to trust him, tried to focus on the path and not the void waiting to swallow them if they made one wrong move. Finally, mercifully, the trail widened and they emerged onto a plateau. Rowan stopped Flint and turned to look back at the way they'd come. "That's the worst part," he said. "From here it gets easier." "Thank God," Elara muttered, her entire body shaking. They continued across the plateau, the ground more level now. The mountains surrounded them on all sides, their peaks white and sharp against the blue sky. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, raw and wild and completely indifferent to human suffering. Around mid-afternoon, they reached another ridge that overlooked a deep valley. The view was stunning, mountains stretching in every direction, their peaks white against the blue sky. Rowan stopped and dismounted, leaning heavily on Flint's side. "This is it," he said. "This is what?" "Where it happened, the bear attack." Elara looked around. The ridge was narrow, with steep drops on both sides. One wrong step and you'd fall hundreds of feet. "You were here?" she asked. "About 100 yards that way." He pointed down the ridge. "I'd been tracking the bear for 2 days. Thought I had it cornered. Turns out I was the one who was cornered." He walked slowly along the ridge, his cane digging into the snow. Elara followed, giving him space but staying close enough to help if he needed it. "I remember the sound," Rowan said. "The roar, it was so loud it felt like the whole mountain was screaming, and then the pain, sharp and hot, and everywhere." He stopped at a spot where the snow was thinner, swept away by the wind. "I fell here. Thought I was going to die. The bear was on top of me and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All I could think was that this was it. This was how I'd go out." "But you didn't," Elara said softly. "No. Marcus and the others got to me in time, drove the bear off, carried me back to the ranch." He paused. "I wished they hadn't." "Why?" "Because dying would have been easier than living like this. Broken. Useless." Elara stepped closer. "You're not useless." "I was. For 2 years I was nothing but a burden." "And now?" Rowan looked at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "Now I'm trying to be something more." He turned back to the valley, his shoulders shaking. Elara didn't say anything. She just stood beside him and let him cry. When he finally stopped, he wiped his face roughly with his sleeve. "I needed to come back here," he said. "I needed to see it again, to prove to myself that it didn't own me anymore." "Does it?" "No, not anymore." They stood there for a long time, looking out at the mountains. The wind howled around them, carrying the scent of pine and snow and something wild that had no name. "I was so angry after the attack," Rowan said quietly. "Angry at the bear, at myself, at the world. I kept thinking that if I'd been faster, smarter, better, it wouldn't have happened, that I'd failed some kind of test. It wasn't a test. It was just bad luck. Maybe, but it didn't feel that way. It felt like punishment for being arrogant, for thinking I was invincible." "Everyone thinks they're invincible until they're not." Rowan turned to look at her. "When did you stop thinking that?" "I never started. I've known since I was young that the world doesn't care about what you want or what you deserve. It just keeps moving, and you either keep up or you get left behind. That's a hard way to live." "It's the only way I know." Rowan reached out and took her hand. "Maybe we can find a different way. Together." Elara squeezed his fingers. "Maybe." Then Rowan took a deep breath and turned to her with something new in his eyes, something that looked almost like fear, but sharper. "I want to ride down into the valley," he said. Elara's stomach dropped. "Rowan, that's dangerous, I know, but I need to do it. I need to ride through the place that broke me and come out the other side." "What if you can't?" "Then at least I tried." Elara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him this was too much, too soon, but she saw the determination in his eyes, and she knew. This was the whole point. This was why they'd come. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." The descent into the valley was terrifying. The trail was steep and icy, winding through narrow passes and along cliffs that dropped into nothing. Juniper slipped twice, and each time Elara's heart stopped. But the mare found her footing and kept going, Her instincts sure, even when Elara's confidence wasn't. Rowan rode ahead, his focus absolute. He moved like he used to, Claire had said, like he knew the mountains. And watching him now, Elara believed it. She could see it in the way he leaned into the turns, the way he read the terrain, the way he guided Flint with small movements that looked like muscle memory. This was who he'd been before the attack. This was the man the mountains had taken, and he was taking himself back. Halfway down, the trail narrowed to barely wider than a horse. Rock wall on one side, empty air on the other. Elara's breath caught in her throat. "Don't look down," Rowan called back. "Watch my back. Follow exactly where I go." Elara nodded, even though he couldn't see her. She fixed her eyes on Rowan's back and followed. One step, then another, then another. Juniper's hooves clicked against stone. The sound echoed off the cliff face, magnified into something ominous. Elara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the reins. But she kept going. Because Rowan was keeping going, and if he could do this with a broken body and 2 years of fear weighing him down, then she could do it too. Finally, mercifully, the trail widened again. Elara let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her chest for hours. "You all right?" Rowan called. "Define all right." "Still breathing?" "Barely." "Then you're all right." They continued down, the trail getting easier with each turn. The valley floor rose up to meet them, and soon they were riding on level ground again. They reached the valley floor as the sun started to set. It was quieter here, sheltered from the wind. Snow covered everything, smooth and untouched. Rowan dismounted and stood in the middle of the valley, looking around. "I did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You did. I rode through the valley. I came back to the place that nearly killed me, and I survived." Elara dismounted and walked over to him. "How do you feel?" Rowan turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Not hope, not determination. Peace. "I feel free," he said. And then, without warning, he pulled her into a hug. Elara froze for a second, surprised. Then she wrapped her arms around him and hugged him back. They stood there in the snow, holding each other, two people who'd been broken in different ways but were somehow finding a way to heal. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan was smiling. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved my life, Elara. Maybe not in the way Marcus did, but you saved it all the same." Elara felt her throat tighten. "You saved mine too." "How?" "You gave me something to fight for, something bigger than just surviving." They set up camp in the valley, the fire burning bright against the darkness. As they ate, Rowan talked more than Elara had ever heard him talk, about his father, about his brother, about the ranch before everything fell apart, about the dreams he'd had as a young man, dreams that had seemed so real and possible before the bear had taken them away. "I wanted to expand the ranch," he said, "build it into something that would last generations. I had plans drawn up, contracts ready, everything." "What happened to those plans?" "Packed away in a trunk somewhere. After the attack, I couldn't look at them. They felt like lies, promises I'd made to a future that didn't exist anymore." "Maybe they weren't lies. Maybe they were just delayed." Rowan looked at her across the fire. "You really believe that?" "I believe that giving up is easier than trying, and you've been taking the easy road for 2 years. Maybe it's time to take the hard one again. The hard road nearly killed me. The easy one was killing you slower. At least the hard road gives you a chance." Rowan was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames. "I'll think about it," he said finally. And Elara knew that was the best she was going to get. When the fire died down and the cold became unbearable, they retreated to the tent. This time, they didn't keep their distance. Elara lay close to Rowan, her head resting against his shoulder, his arm around her. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Of what?" "Of going back, of everything changing. A little, but mostly I'm just tired." "Then sleep. I'll keep watch." "You don't have to." "I want to." Rowan kissed the top of her head, and Elara felt something shift between them. Something that had been building since the day she arrived. Trust. Partnership. Maybe even love. She stayed awake long into the night, listening to Rowan's breathing even out into sleep, watching the stars through the gap in the tent flap. And for the first time since leaving her family, Elara felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The third day, they rode back. The journey was easier, the trail familiar now. Rowan rode with his head up, his shoulders back, like he'd shed a weight he'd been carrying for years. They stopped at the narrow ridge where they'd almost lost their nerve on the way down. "I can't believe we made it through here," Elara said, looking at the drop. "We did more than make it. We conquered it." "You conquered it, I just didn't die." Rowan laughed. "That counts." They rode on, and Elara found herself studying everything differently. The mountains didn't seem as threatening. The cold didn't bite as hard. Even the trail felt less treacherous. Or maybe she was just getting used to it. They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Margareta stood on the porch, her arms crossed, waiting. Rowan dismounted and walked over to her. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Margareta pulled him into a hug. "Don't you ever do that to me again," she said, her voice thick. "I won't. I promise." She pulled back and looked at Elara. "Thank you for bringing him back." "He brought himself back. I just came along." Margareta almost smiled. "Either way, thank you." Marcus came out of the barn and stopped short when he saw them. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "You actually made it." "Did you doubt me?" Rowan asked. "Completely." They all laughed, and the sound filled the cold evening air. That night, the house felt different. Warmer, somehow. Less like a fortress, and more like a home. Elara sat in the library, writing another letter to Thomas, when Rowan appeared in the doorway. "Can I come in?" he asked. "It's your house." "It's our house." Elara looked up at him, and he walked over and sat beside her. "I've been thinking," he said, "about us. About this marriage." Alara's heart started racing. And I think we should make it real." "What do you mean?" "I mean, stop pretending this is just an arrangement. Stop keeping our distance. I want this to be a partnership, a real one." Elara set down her pen. "Is that what you want, or what you think you should want?" "It's what I want, because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a stranger and became someone I can't imagine living without." Elara felt tears sting her eyes. "I feel the same way." Rowan took her hand. "Then let's do this right. Let's build something together. Something that's ours." "All right," Elara said. "Let's build it." And for the first time since arriving at the ranch, Elara felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because she'd been forced here, but because she'd chosen to stay. The weeks that followed the mountain journey felt like waking up from a long, dark dream. Rowan changed in ways Elara hadn't expected. He started working with the ranch hands again, not as much as before the attack, but enough to feel useful. He rode Flint every morning, sometimes alone, sometimes with Elara beside him on Juniper. And he smiled more, real smiles that reached his eyes and stayed there. But change wasn't smooth. It never was. There were still days when the pain was too much and he retreated to his study. Days when his temper flared over nothing and he snapped at everyone around him. Days when Elara saw the old Rowan, the hollow, defeated one, staring back at her from across the dinner table. On one of those days, about a month after they'd returned from the mountains, Elara found him sitting in the dark library, staring at the painting of his younger self. "You all right?" she asked from the doorway. No, at least he was honest. Elara walked in and sat beside him. "What's wrong?" "I'm tired," he said. "Tired of fighting. Tired of pretending I'm better than I am. Tired of watching everyone wait for me to break again." "No one's waiting for that." "Yes, they are. My mother watches me like I'm made of glass. Marcus hesitates before asking me to do anything. Even you look at me sometimes like you're checking to make sure I'm still holding together." Elara couldn't deny that. "I just want to make sure you're okay." "I'm not okay. I'm probably never going to be completely okay, and I'm starting to think that's the problem." "What do you mean?" Rowan turned to face her. "Everyone keeps waiting for me to go back to who I was before the attack, but that person doesn't exist anymore. He died on that ridge 2 years ago." "Then who are you now?" "I don't know, and maybe that's all right. Maybe I don't need to be who I was. Maybe I just need to figure out who I can be." Elara reached for his hand. "You're already doing that." "Am I, or am I just pretending?" "You rode into those mountains, Rowan. You faced the thing that broke you and came back stronger. That's not pretending." But what if it was just one moment? What if tomorrow I wake up and I can't do it again? Then you don't do it tomorrow. You wait until you can. Rowan looked down at their joined hands. How are you always so sure? I'm not. I'm terrified most of the time, but I keep going anyway because the alternative is giving up, and I refuse to give up on you. He pulled her closer and kissed her forehead. I don't deserve you. Good thing you don't get to decide that. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Finally, Rowan spoke again. I want to show you something. He led her outside, past the barn, to a small building Elara had never been in before. It was old and weathered, with a slanted roof and windows covered in dust. Rowan unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside was a workshop. Tools hung on the walls, half-finished projects sat on benches, and sawdust covered the floor. I used to make things, Rowan said, his voice quiet. Furniture, mostly. Chairs, tables, cabinets. My father taught me when I was young, said a man should know how to build with his hands. Why did you stop? After the attack, I couldn't hold the tools steady enough. My hands shake too much. He held up his left hand, and Elara saw the tremor he usually tried to hide. I tried a few times, but everything came out crooked and wrong, so I gave up. And now? Now I want to try again, even if it doesn't work, even if everything I make is garbage. I want to try. Elara walked over to one of the benches and ran her hand along the surface. What would you make? I don't know. Something small to start, maybe a box or a chair for the kitchen. Can I help? Rowan looked surprised. You want to? Why not? I don't know anything about woodworking, but I can learn. He smiled then, and it was the kind of smile that made Elara's chest ache. All right, we'll start tomorrow. That night at dinner, Rowan announced his plan to the household. I'm reopening the workshop, he said. Margareta paused mid-bite. You're what? You heard me. I'm going back to building things. Can you even... She stopped herself. I mean, is that safe? Probably not, but I'm doing it anyway. Clara looked thrilled. That's wonderful, Rowan. Marcus nodded. About time you stopped hiding in that study. Margareta set down her fork and studied her son. And if you can't do it? If your hands won't cooperate? Then I'll figure something else out. But I'm tired of not trying. Margareta's expression softened. Your father would be proud. I hope so. The next morning, Elara met Rowan in the workshop. He'd already cleared off one of the benches and laid out tools, saws, chisels, planes, things Elara didn't have names for. First lesson, Rowan said. Measure twice, cut once. He handed her a piece of wood and showed her how to mark it, how to hold the saw, how to cut in a straight line. Elara's first attempt was a disaster. The line came out crooked and the wood splintered at the end. That's normal, Rowan said. Try again. Her second attempt was better. By the third, she was starting to get the feel of it. Rowan worked beside her, his movements slower than they probably used to be, but steady. His hands did shake, but he compensated, taking his time, adjusting his grip. They worked in comfortable silence. The only sounds, the rasp of saws, and the occasional muttered curse when something went wrong. After a few hours, Elara stepped back and looked at what she'd made, a rough, uneven box that leaned slightly to one side. It's terrible, she said. It's your first try. Of course it's terrible. What about yours? Rowan held up a small wooden frame. It wasn't perfect. The corners didn't quite line up, and there were visible gaps, but it was recognizable as what it was supposed to be. Better than I expected, he admitted. Worse than I hoped. What's it for? I thought I'd make a frame for that letter you wrote to Thomas, the one you keep folded in your pocket. Elara felt her throat tighten. You noticed that? I notice everything about you. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just kissed him. They worked in the workshop every morning after that, building things that were imperfect and crooked and exactly what they needed. And slowly, piece by piece, Rowan started building something else too. Confidence. Purpose. A reason to wake up in the morning that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with choice. One afternoon, Clara found Elara in the garden and sat down beside her. He's different, Clara said. Since you came here, since the mountains. Is that good or bad? Good. Definitely good. He's starting to look like himself again. Or maybe not himself, But someone new, someone better. Elara pulled a weed from the soil and tossed it aside. He's doing the work. I'm just watching. You're doing more than watching. You're giving him a reason to do the work. Maybe. Or maybe he was ready and I just happened to be here. Clara shook her head. You don't give yourself enough credit. Before you came, he'd given up. Completely. Now he's building furniture and riding horses and talking about expanding the ranch. That's not coincidence. Elara didn't know what to say to that. She'd never thought of herself as someone who could change another person's life. She'd always been too busy trying to survive her own. Can I ask you something? Clara said. Sure. Do you love him? The question caught Elara off guard. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. Did she love Rowan? She cared about him. She respected him. She felt something warm and dangerous in her chest when he smiled at her. But was that love? I don't know, Elara said finally. I've never been in love before. I don't know what it's supposed to feel like. It feels like you can't imagine your life without them. Like their happiness matters more than your own. Like you'd walk into a burning building if it meant keeping them safe. Elara thought about that. Thought about the mountain journey. About standing beside Rowan while he cried over the place that had broken him. About the way her heart had stopped when the elk had appeared in the clearing, thinking for one terrible moment that it was a bear. Then maybe I do, she said quietly. Clara smiled. Then you should tell him. Why? Because people need to hear it, especially people who've spent years thinking they're not worth loving. That evening, Elara tried to find the right moment to tell Rowan how she felt, but the moment never came. They worked in the workshop until sunset, then had dinner with the household, then retreated to the library like they did most nights. And every time Elara thought about saying something, the words got stuck in her throat. What if she was wrong? What if what she felt wasn't love but something else? What if saying it out loud changed everything in ways she couldn't predict? So she stayed quiet and hated herself a little for it. Winter loosened its grip slowly, reluctantly. The snow started melting, revealing brown earth and dead grass underneath. The days grew longer, the air less bitter. And with the changing season came news from home. The letter arrived on a bright afternoon in early March. Clara brought it to Elara while she was helping in the kitchen. It's from your mother, Clara said. Elara's hands shook as she opened it. The handwriting was neater than before, steadier, a good sign. Dear Elara, I hope this letter finds you well. Thomas asks about you every day. He wants to know when you'll visit, though I tell him it may be a while yet. The medicine you arranged has been a blessing. I'm stronger now than I've been in years. The doctor says if I continue improving, I may have more time than we thought. Thomas is doing well in his studies. The fund Mrs. Hale established is being put to good use. He talks about becoming a teacher someday. Can you imagine? Our Thomas, teaching. I know I didn't give you a choice in this marriage. I know you were angry, but I hope you can understand that I did what I thought was necessary to keep you both alive. I hope you found some measure of happiness there, and I hope someday you might forgive me. There's something else I need to tell you, something I should have told you before you left, but I was too afraid. Your father, I know I've never spoken much about him, but he was a good man, Elara, strong and kind like you. He died when you were too young to remember, but he would have been proud of who you've become. I see him in you sometimes, the way you refuse to give up, even when everything seems impossible, the way you fight for the people you love. I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to know where that strength comes from. With love, Mother. Elara read the letter 3 times, her emotions a tangled mess. Relief, because her family was all right. Anger, because her mother still didn't fully understand what she'd done. And something else, something softer, something that felt almost like understanding. Her mother had been desperate, dying, watching her children starve, and she'd made the only choice she thought she had. It didn't make it right, but it made it human. That evening, she showed the letter to Rowan. He read it silently, then handed it back. She sounds better. She is. The medicine is working. That's good. And your brother? Doing well. Wants to be a teacher. Rowan smiled. He'd be good at that. Smart kid, from what you've told me. Elara folded the letter carefully. She told me about my father. I never knew anything about him before. What did she say? That he was strong, that he never gave up, that he would have been proud of me. He would be. Anyone would be. Elara felt tears sting her eyes. I don't know if I can forgive her for what she did. You don't have to forgive her right now, or ever if you don't want to. Forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone. Then what do I owe her? Nothing. But maybe you owe yourself the chance to let go of the anger, not for her sake, for yours. Elara leaned against him and he wrapped his arms around her. When did you get so wise? She asked. I'm not wise. I'm just tired of being angry at the world. They sat together in the quiet library, holding each other, two people learning how to let go of the things that had been weighing them down for years. I want to write back, Elara said after a while. Then write back. What should I say? The truth, whatever that is for you. Elara pulled away and walked to the desk. She sat down, picked up a pen, and stared at the blank paper for a long time. Finally, she began to write. Dear Mother, I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm glad Thomas is doing well, and I'm glad the medicine is working. Thank you for telling me about Father. I wish I'd known him. I wish I remembered him. But knowing he was strong, that he didn't give up, helps. It makes sense of things I didn't understand about myself. You asked if I found happiness here. The truth is, I don't know if happiness is the right word, but I found purpose. I found someone who needs me as much as I need him. I found a life that's mine, even if it didn't start the way I wanted. I was angry when I first came here. Angry at you for making this choice for me. Angry at the world for putting us in a position where you felt you had to. But I'm trying not to be angry anymore. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I don't know when I'll visit, but I will. Soon. I want to see Thomas. I want to see you. I want to show you that I'm all right, because I am all right. Maybe not in the way you expected, but in the way I needed. Take care of yourself, and tell Thomas I love him. Love, Elara. She sealed the letter and left it for Clara to mail. That night, lying in bed beside Rowan, Elara felt something settle inside her. Not complete peace, not total forgiveness, but acceptance. This was her life now, and she was choosing to make it mean something. Spring came fully in April, bringing with it green shoots and warmer days and a sense of renewal that touched everything. The ranch came alive. Calves were born. Crops were planted. The hands worked from dawn until dusk, and the air filled with the sounds of hammers and laughter and life. Rowan threw himself into the work, not leading it the way he once had, but participating in ways that mattered. He helped mend fences, supervised the planting, and spent hours in the workshop building furniture for the house. Elara worked alongside him, learning the rhythms of ranch life. She helped Clara in the kitchen, worked in the garden that was finally starting to bloom, and rode juniper every chance she got. And slowly, imperceptibly, the ranch stopped feeling like Rowan's place and started feeling like theirs. One evening in late April, Margareta pulled Elara aside after dinner. Walk with me, she said. They walked out to the ridge overlooking the northern pasture where the cattle grazed in the fading light. I wanted to thank you, Margareta said. For what? For not giving up on him, on any of this. Elara shrugged. I didn't do anything special. Yes, you did. You could have stayed in your room, could have gone through the motions and hated every minute of it. But you didn't. You fought, and you made him fight too. He would have fought eventually. No, he wouldn't have. He'd given up, Elara, completely. And if you hadn't come here, he'd still be sitting in that study waiting to die. Elara didn't know what to say to that. Margareta turned to face her. I know I haven't been kind to you. I know I treated this marriage like a business arrangement. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see what you've done. And I'm grateful. I didn't do it for gratitude. I know. You did it because it was the right thing to do. That's what makes it matter. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the mountains. He loves you, Margareta said finally. He hasn't said it yet, but he does. I can see it. Elara's heart stumbled. I know. Do you love him? Yes. Then don't wait for him to say it first. Men are terrible at these things, especially stubborn ones like my son. Elara almost laughed. I'll keep that in mind. Margareta started walking back toward the house, then paused. You know, when I arranged this marriage, I thought I was solving a problem, getting Rowan a caretaker, giving your family security. But I was wrong. About what? About what you'd be to each other. I thought you'd be convenient. Turns out you're essential. I don't know about that. I do. And so does he, even if he's too stubborn to say it out loud. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Elara found Rowan in the library. He was sitting by the fire, a book open on his lap, but he wasn't reading. He was just staring into the flames. Elara sat beside him. What are you thinking about? Everything. Nothing. How different things are now compared to 6 months ago. Good different or bad different? Good. Definitely good. Elara took a breath. Can I tell you something? Always. I love you. The words hung in the air between them. Rowan set down his book and turned to face her fully. Say it again. I love you, Rowan. I didn't think I would. I didn't even want to. But I do. He pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. I love you too, he said against her hair. I've loved you since you walked into my study that first morning and told me to stop feeling sorry for myself. I didn't say that. You implied it strongly. Elara laughed, and the sound filled the quiet room. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other by the fire, two people who'd found something neither of them had been looking for. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan took her face in his hands. I want to build a life with you, he said. A real one. Not the arrangement my mother set up, something we choose, every day. I want that too. Then let's do it. Let's make this marriage everything we never thought it could be. Elara kissed him, and in that kiss was every promise she'd never thought she'd make. They moved Elara's things into Rowan's room the next day. Not because anyone told them to, not because it was expected, because they wanted to, because sleeping in separate rooms had started to feel wrong. Clara helped with the moving, a knowing smile on her face the whole time. About time, she said, carrying an armload of dresses down the hall. About time for what? For you two to stop pretending you're not completely in love with each other. Elara felt her face heat. Were we that obvious? To everyone except yourselves. That night, Elara lay in bed beside Rowan, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. This feels right, she said. It does. I never thought I'd say that about being here, about this marriage. Neither did I. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time since arriving at the ranch, Elara slept without nightmares. Summer arrived with heat and long days and work that never seemed to end. But it was good work, the kind that left you exhausted but satisfied. Elara and Rowan fell into a rhythm. They worked together during the day and collapsed together at night, too tired to do much but talk and laugh and occasionally argue about stupid things that didn't matter. One afternoon, Thomas's letter finally arrived. Elara tore it open, eager to hear from him. Dear Elara, I miss you so much it hurts sometimes, but Mama says you're happy where you are, so I'm trying to be happy for you. I'm doing good in school, really good. Mr. Peters says I might be able to go to the university in a few years if I keep studying. Can you imagine? Me at university. Mama's doing better too. She walks around now without getting tired. She even cooked dinner last week. It wasn't very good, but it was nice to have her trying. Will you really come visit someday? I want you to meet my friends, and I want to hear about the mountains. Mama says they're big enough to hold up the sky. Is that true? Also, there's a girl in my class named Sarah. She's really smart, and she let me borrow her book on geography. I think she might like me. Is that weird? Write back soon. Love, Thomas, Elara showed the letter to Rowan that evening. He wants you to visit, Rowan said. I know. So let's go. Elara looked up, surprised. What? Let's visit your family. You haven't seen them in months, and I'd like to meet the brother you talk about constantly. Are you serious? Completely. We could leave in a few weeks, stay for a week or so. Come back before the harvest. Elara felt hope bloom in her chest. You do that? Of course. They're your family. That makes them my family too. Elara kissed him hard, and he laughed against her mouth. I'll take that as a yes, he said. They left in mid-June, taking the carriage because Rowan's leg wasn't up for a long ride on horseback. The journey took 2 days, and Elara spent most of it staring out the window, her stomach in knots. What would her mother say? What would Thomas think of Rowan? What if this was a mistake? But when they finally arrived at the cabin, all her fears melted away. Thomas burst out of the door before the carriage had fully stopped, running toward them with a huge grin on his face. "Elara!" She jumped down and caught him in a hug, holding him tight. "You're taller," she said. "You're different." Good different or bad different? Good, definitely good. Her mother appeared in the doorway, moving slowly but steadily. She looked healthier than Elara had seen her in years. Her face had color, and she stood straighter, like the weight of illness had finally lifted. Rowan climbed down from the carriage, leaning on his cane. Thomas stared at him. "You're really tall. And you're really observant," Rowan said, extending his hand. "I'm Rowan." Thomas shook it solemnly. "Thomas, Elara talks about you in her letters. Good things, I hope." "Mostly." Rowan laughed, and Elara felt her chest expand with something that felt suspiciously like joy. Her mother approached slowly, her eyes moving between Elara and Rowan. "Welcome," she said to Rowan. "Thank you for bringing her. Thank you for having us." There was an awkward moment where nobody knew quite what to say. Then Thomas grabbed Rowan's hand. "Come on, I'll show you where we fish. There's a stream just past those trees, and last week I caught a trout this big." He held his hands apart in an exaggeration that made everyone smile. Rowan let himself be pulled away, and Elara was left standing with her mother. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then her mother spoke. "You look happy." "I am. I'm glad. I wasn't sure. I worried that I'd made a terrible mistake." "You did make a mistake, but it turned out all right anyway." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Elara, for everything." Elara stepped forward and hugged her mother. It wasn't a complete forgiveness. The hurt was still there, would probably always be there in some form. But it was a start. They stayed for 8 days. 8 days of Thomas showing Rowan every corner of the woods, pointing out animal tracks and teaching him the names of trees. 8 days of Elara helping her mother in the kitchen, the two of them finding a new rhythm after months apart. 8 days of long conversations by the fire about everything and nothing. Rowan fit in better than Elara had expected. He listened to Thomas's endless stories with genuine interest. He helped repair the cabin's roof without being asked, and he treated Elara's mother with a respect that seemed to heal something broken between them. On the 3rd night, after Thomas had gone to bed, Elara's mother pulled Rowan aside. "Thank you," she said, "for taking care of my daughter. She takes care of me more than I take care of her. Still, I can see that she's well, that she's loved. That's more than I had any right to hope for. She deserves to be loved. She's the strongest person I've ever met." Her mother smiled. "She gets that from her father. He was stubborn too, wouldn't give up on anything once he'd set his mind to it. Elara told me you talked about him in your letter. I should have talked about him years ago, but it hurt too much. Losing him nearly broke me, and I think I've been broken for a long time. Broken doesn't mean finished." Her mother looked at him sharply. "Where did you hear that?" "Your daughter. She told me that when I'd given up on myself. She's wiser than I ever was. She learned from someone." On the 5th day, Thomas convinced them all to go to the stream. It was a beautiful spot, clear water running over smooth rocks, surrounded by trees that provided shade from the summer heat. Thomas showed Rowan how to fish, demonstrating the proper way to cast a line with the seriousness of someone imparting sacred knowledge. Rowan played along, asking questions and making mistakes on purpose, just to see Thomas's exasperated reactions. Elara sat on the bank with her mother, watching them. "He's good with children," her mother observed. "He is. Have you thought about what? About having children of your own?" Elara felt her face heat. "We've talked about it. Someday. But not yet." "Why not?" "Because we're still figuring out how to be married. Adding children to that seems like asking for chaos." Her mother laughed. "Marriage is chaos. Children just make it organized chaos." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Rowan finally catch a fish with Thomas's guidance. "I was wrong about you," her mother said quietly. "What do you mean?" "When you were young, I thought you were too fragile, too soft. I worried that the world would break you the way it broke me. And now? Now I see that I raise steel wrapped in silk. You're stronger than I ever was. Elara didn't know what to say to that. She just leaned her head on her mother's shoulder and watched her husband laugh with her brother. On the last night, Elara's mother pulled out a small wooden box. "I want you to have this," she said, handing it to Elara. Inside was a ring, simple, silver, with a small blue stone. "It was your father's mother's ring. He gave it to me when we married. I want you to have it." Elara's throat tightened. "Are you sure?" "You're building a life, Elara, a real one. You should have something that connects you to where you came from." Elara slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Take care of yourself. And take care of him. He's a good man." "I will." When they left the next morning, Thomas cried. So did Elara. Her mother stood in the doorway watching them go, her hand raised in farewell. But as the carriage pulled away and the cabin disappeared behind them, Elara felt something shift. She was going home. Not to the cabin. Not to the place she'd been born. To the ranch. To Rowan. To the life they were building together. "You all right?" Rowan asked, taking her hand. "Yeah, I am. Your brother's a good kid." "He is. He really liked you." "The feeling's mutual. Smart as hell, that one. He'll do well." Elara leaned against Rowan's shoulder. "Thank you for coming with me, for being kind to them. They're your family. That makes them important. They liked you too, my mother especially. She's stronger than she thinks she is. So are you." Rowan kissed the top of her head. "We all are. We just forget sometimes." The harvest came in September, and with it, the hardest work Elara had ever done. She worked alongside the ranch hands, hauling grain and stacking hay until her back screamed and her hands blistered. But she didn't complain, because this was hers. This life, this work, this land. She'd earned it. One evening, after a particularly brutal day, Elara and Rowan collapsed on the porch, too exhausted to move. "I can't feel my arms," Elara said. "That's normal." "Is it always this hard?" "Usually harder." "Great. Something to look forward to." Rowan laughed and pulled her close. "You did good today." "Just today?" "Every day." Elara rested her head on his shoulder and looked out at the mountains, dark against the evening sky. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met?" she asked. "Sometimes. I'd probably still be in that study, or dead." "Don't say that. It's true. You saved my life, Elara, in every way that matters. You saved mine too." "How?" "You gave me a reason to fight for something other than survival. You gave me a future." Rowan kissed the top of her head. "Then I guess we saved each other." "I guess we did." They sat in silence, watching the stars come out one by one. "I want to expand the ranch," Rowan said suddenly. Elara looked up at him. "What?" "I've been thinking about those old plans I had, before the attack. And I think I want to try again." "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm going to do it anyway. Build a new barn, expand the herd, maybe hire a few more hands. That's a lot of work. I know, but I want to build something that lasts, something we can pass on." "Pass on to who?" Rowan looked at her, his eyes serious. "To our children, someday." Elara's breath caught. "You want children?" "Eventually. Not right now, but someday." "Do you?" I haven't really thought about it." "Think about it. No rush, just think about it." Elara did think about it. For days she thought about little else. Children, a family, a future that extended beyond just her and Rowan. It terrified her, but it also felt right. One evening she found Rowan in the workshop and sat down beside him. "I've been thinking," she said. "About?" "About what you said. About children." Rowan set down the piece of wood he'd been sanding. And I think I want that, someday. A family. Something we build together." Rowan smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made Elara's heart skip. "Someday sounds good. But not yet. Not yet. We've got time." Winter returned as it always did. But this time, Elara wasn't afraid of it. She'd survived one winter at the ranch. She could survive another. And this time, she wasn't alone. On the first snowfall of the season, Rowan surprised her with a gift. A chair, handmade with her name carved into the back. It's crooked, he said, almost apologetically. It's perfect. The legs aren't even. I don't care. She sat in it, running her hands along the armrests. When did you make this? Been working on it for weeks. Wanted to finish it before the snow came. Why? Because you needed a chair that was yours. Something that wasn't borrowed or handed down. Something made just for you. Elara felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you. You're welcome. That evening, they sat by the fire in the library, Elara in her crooked chair, Rowan in his usual spot, and talked about the future, about expanding the ranch, about maybe building a new barn, about the possibility of children someday, though neither of them was ready for that yet. And as the snow fell outside and the fire crackled beside them, Elara realized something. She'd spent so much of her life being afraid. Afraid of hunger, of debt, of losing the people she loved. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Because she'd learned something important in these mountains, in this house, with this man. Fear only wins if you let it. And she was done letting it win. Years passed, not smoothly, not perfectly, but they passed. Rowan's leg never fully healed. Some days were worse than others, but he learned to work with the pain instead of against it. He expanded the ranch like he'd planned, building a new barn and hiring more hands. The operation grew, became more successful, became something he could be proud of. Elara never stopped missing her family, but she visited when she could, and she wrote letters every week without fail. Thomas eventually did go to university, became a teacher just like he'd dreamed. He wrote to her about his students, about the girl named Sarah who'd become his wife, about the life he was building. The ranch thrived. New buildings went up. The herd grew. The land expanded. And somewhere along the way, Elara and Rowan stopped being two broken people trying to survive. They became partners. Equals. A team. In their third year of marriage, Elara got pregnant. It wasn't planned exactly, but it wasn't unwanted either. When she told Rowan, he picked her up and spun her around despite his bad leg, laughing like she'd never heard him laugh before. We're having a baby, he kept saying, like he couldn't quite believe it. We're having a baby, Elara confirmed, feeling terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Their daughter was born in the spring, during a thunderstorm that shook the house. They named her Rose, after Rowan's grandmother. She had Rowan's dark hair and Elara's stubborn chin, and from the moment she was born, she wrapped both of them around her tiny finger. Rowan was a natural father, patient and gentle, and completely besotted with his daughter. Elara watched him hold Rose, saw the way his face softened when he looked at her, and felt something settle in her chest. This was what it meant to build a life. Not just surviving, but thriving, creating something new and precious and worth protecting. 2 years later, they had a son. They named him Thomas, after Elara's brother. He had Elara's eyes and Rowan's smile, and he was loud and wild and everything a boy should be. The house filled with noise and chaos and life. Margareta, who'd softened considerably over the years, doted on her grandchildren with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone. Clara helped with the children, becoming as much family as employee. And Marcus taught both kids to ride as soon as they were old enough to sit in a saddle. On their 5th anniversary, Elara and Rowan rode back to the valley where everything had changed. They left the children with Clara and Margareta and took just themselves and the horses. The place looked the same, snow-covered and silent and beautiful. But they were different, stronger, scarred, but whole. Do you ever regret it? Elara asked. This life we built? Rowan looked at her, and in his eyes she saw everything she needed to know. Never, he said. Not once. Even though it started with no choice? Especially because of that. Because we took something forced and made it ours. Elara smiled. That's a hell of a way to look at it. It's the truth. They stood there together looking out at the mountains, two people who'd learned the hardest lesson life had to offer. That sometimes the things you never wanted become the only things worth having. That broken doesn't mean finished. That love isn't always a choice at first, but it can become one. And that the best lives are the ones you fight for, even when, especially when, the odds are against you. The wind picked up, and Elara shivered. Rowan pulled her close, and they turned back toward the horses. Ready to go home? He asked. Yeah, the kids are probably driving your mother crazy by now. Rowan laughed. Good. She deserves it after what she put us through. They rode back together side by side, partners in every sense of the word. And when they reached the ranch and saw Rose and Thomas running out to meet them, their faces bright with excitement, Elara felt something she'd never expected to feel. Complete. Not perfect. Life was never perfect. But complete. Because this ranch, this family, this man beside her, was everything she'd never known she needed. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Years later, when Rose was 16 and Thomas was 14, Elara sat on the porch watching them argue about something trivial. Rowan came out and sat beside her, his hair more gray than dark now, his movement slower but still steady. "They fight like we used to," he observed. "We still fight." "Not like we used to." Elara leaned against him. "No, not like we used to." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children. "Do you ever think about telling them?" Rowan asked. "About how we started?" "Sometimes, but I don't know if they'd understand." "They might, someday. Maybe when they're older, when they've lived enough to understand that life doesn't always go the way you plan. And that sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that's better than okay." Rose and Thomas's argument dissolved into laughter, and they ran off together toward the barn. "We did good," Rowan said. "We did. I love you. I love you too." They sat together as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and orange. And Elara thought about everything that had brought them to this moment, the desperation, the anger, the fear, the choice to keep going when giving up would have been easier, the choice to see the man behind the bitterness, the choice to build something real from something broken. And she realized something. Life had never asked her what she wanted. But in the end, it had given her exactly what she needed: a home, a family, a purpose. And a love that started with nothing and became everything. The mountains stood unchanged in the distance, ancient and eternal. But Elara had changed. From a girl sold to survive to a woman who'd learned to thrive. From someone who'd never had a choice to someone who made choices every single day. From someone who'd been given to a stranger to someone who'd found a partner. And that, she thought, was the real story. Not the beginning, where everything was forced and wrong, but the middle and the end, where everything became exactly right. Because the truth is, life doesn't care about your plans. But if you're brave enough, strong enough, stubborn enough to keep fighting, sometimes it gives you something better than you could have ever planned for yourself. Sometimes it gives you everything.